In this video, we will be matching graphs with rational functions, and each one of these are going to have two vertical asymptotes. So first of all, there's not going to be any holes in this graph, no removable discontinuities. So let's remember that as we do these problems. So we have these 6 graphs down here, and we want to match them with these two functions. So I'm going to start with g of x. Okay, so I can't do anything with the top, but I can factor the bottom. Okay, so the top stays as a 3x. Okay, and the bottom, if we factor this, I need two numbers that multiply to get -8, but add to get 2. Okay, so that's going to be +4 and -2. X plus 4 and x minus 2. If you multiply the 4 and the -2, you get -8. If you add these two numbers, you get the 2. Okay, now to find the vertical asymptotes, you take both of those, x plus 4, set it equal to 0, and that would give you, move the 4 over, so that would give you x equals -4 for our first vertical asymptote, and x minus 2 equals 0. Move that 2 over, and you would get 2 for our vertical asymptote. Okay, so our VA vertical asymptotes are at x equals -4 and x equals 2. Okay, that's the starting information that we have. Okay, the next thing that we want to do is look at our horizontal asymptotes and see what that looks like. Okay, so if you've seen the prior video, you remember that if the exponents are bigger on bottom, which they are, this is a 2 and this is a 1, then your horizontal asymptote, I'll call it the HA, is y equals 0. Okay, so that is on the x-axis. So let's see what we have left now that we know the vertical asymptotes are at -4 and 2 and the horizontal asymptotes at 0. Okay, so looking at A, that is a -4 and +2, so it fits that. And we do have a horizontal asymptote that's going on the x-axis. So A is a possibility. I'll write that down. Okay, B, we have -4 and 2 is our horizontal, our vertical asymptotes, and our horizontal is the x-axis, so that's another one that works. B. Okay, this one has vertical asymptotes of -1 and 3. That's not what we're looking for. This one has, though, a vertical asymptote of -4 and 2, but the horizontal asymptote's in the wrong place. It's shifted up to 2, and it should be at 0. That's what we found up here. Okay, so can't be D. This one has the wrong vertical asymptotes, and this one has the wrong vertical asymptotes. So we're down to A and B. Okay, so we look at these two graphs, A and B, and what we're looking for basically is just somewhere that we can plug in that we know will give us the answer between which one of these it is. So I'm looking over here at this -6, and I'm seeing that if I plug in a -6 on this graph, I should be getting a positive answer, right? But if I plugged in a -6 on A, I should be getting a negative answer. So if I plug in a -6 into this function and I get a negative answer, my answer is going to be A. If I get a positive answer, my answer will be B. So let's plug in a -6. So move up here, plug in x equals -6. Okay, and I'm going to use this factored version because it's easier. So it will be y equals 3 times -6 divided by -6 plus 4, and then -6 minus 2. Okay, the top gives us -18. The bottom, this one is going to give us a -2, and this one's going to give us a -8. Okay, so that will be -18. These are positive because I multiply two negatives to get a positive. Okay, so that'd be 16. And 18 divided by 16 is a negative number. Okay, so I don't need to reduce this. I know it's negative, and I know if I plugged in the -6 and I got a negative answer, it's going to be this one because it's below the x-axis at -6. Okay, so our answer for this one is A. So this is g of x. Okay, let's look at the next one. Okay, so we've got this function here. Let's factor the bottom. 5 stays like it is. Okay, so x squared minus 2x minus 3. Two numbers that multiply to get -3 but add to get -2. Okay, so that will be x minus 3 and x plus 1. Okay, multiply those, you get -3. Add them, you get -2. Okay, so for our vertical asymptotes, I'll write them up here. We have x minus 3 equals 0. Move the -3 over, it becomes positive, so x equals 3 is our first one. And we've got x plus 1 equals 0. Move the 1 over, make it negative, so that's -1. So our VAs are x equals -1 and 3. Okay. Our horizontal asymptote, just like the last one, since the exponents are bigger on bottom than they are on top, our horizontal asymptote is y equals 0. Okay. So let's look at what we have, see what our choices are. So we know this is g of x, so it's not going to be that one for sure. We know our vertical asymptotes are at -1 and 3. Not this one, that's at -4, 2. This one works, so C is a possibility, and it has the right horizontal asymptote, so C. Okay, let's look at this one. That one's the vertical and the horizontal asymptotes are in the wrong place. This one has the correct, so there's an asymptote at 3 and one at -1, and the horizontal is here, so E is a possibility. Okay, and this one, 3 and -1, and the horizontal asymptotes in the right place, so F is a possibility. Okay, so C, E, and F. I'm looking at C, E, and F, these three graphs here. Is there a number I can plug in where it would give me the answer just by plugging in one number? Okay, so I'm looking at x equals 0 right here. If I plugged in a 0 right here, this answer would give me an answer that's negative. If I plugged in a 0 right here, this answer would give me one that's positive. And if I plugged in a 0 right here, this answer would give me 0. So I can plug in a 0 into this function, and it will tell me which one of these three it is. Okay, so plug in x equals 0. So it's going to be y equals 5 over 0 minus 3 and 0 plus 1. Okay, so that's 5 on top and -3 on bottom. Notice that that's a negative answer. Okay, so which one of these three, when I plugged in zeros, needs to have has a negative answer? Okay, so here I plugged in a 0, there's a negative answer, so that one's good. Here I plugged in 0, it's positive, so it can't be F. And here I plugged in a 0, and it's right at the x-axis, which is 0, so it can't be E. So that leaves C. C is the answer. Okay, so C is h of x. Okay, and I'm going to do a couple more. They're going to be a little more in depth. Okay, so notice that we have on this one a quadratic on both the top and on the bottom. So I'm going to factor them both, but before I do that, I notice that all three of these terms are divisible by 2, so I'm going to factor out a 2, see what I have left. So if I divide each one of these by 2, first one becomes x squared, this one becomes -3x, and this one becomes -4. And on bottom, we get x squared plus 3x minus 4. So they're close to the same. Be nice if they canceled out, because then all we'd have is a 2, but that's not what happens. So we need to factor both of those. So let me move over here. If I factor this, two numbers that multiply to get -4 but add to get -3. Okay, so that's going to be 4 and -1. Or -4 and 1. Okay, so let's do the top first. -4 and +1 to factor the top. So 2, and then x minus 4, and then x plus 1. Okay, multiply those, you get -4, add them, you get -3. On bottom, two numbers that multiply to get -4 but add to get +3, it's going to be x plus 4 and x minus 1. Okay, so there's the function f of x. Okay, so let's find first the vertical asymptotes by setting these two things equal to 0. So VA, we've got x plus 4 equals 0, which move the 4 over, make it negative. That's x equals -4. And we've got x minus 1 equals 0. Move the 1 over, make it positive. X equals 1. So our VA is x equals -4 and 1. Okay, so there's important information. Our horizontal asymptote, recall that if the exponents are the same, which they are here, you divide the leading coefficients that are in front of the biggest exponent. So that's a 2, and there's no number here, so there's a 1. So our horizontal asymptote is 2 divided by 1, so that's y equals 2. Okay, so that's another bit of important information. Okay, so let's go down here and see which ones that leaves for us. Okay, Vertical asymptote's at -4 and 1. Horizontal asymptote is up at 2. So let's do the horizontal asymptote first. There's only 2 of them, right, that have a horizontal asymptote that are up at 2. Okay, so that leaves C and D. Do they fit the vertical asymptotes? Do they both fit? -4 and 1, -4 and 1. So C and D both work for now. Okay, so we need more information. So I'm going to try to plug in a number that will give us a sure answer for this. So I'm looking here at -2. If I plugged in a -2 into the C graph, it would give me a negative answer because it's down here. If I plugged in a -2 into the D graph, it would give me a positive because it's up here. Okay, so I'm going to plug in x equals -2 into the factored version because it's easier. Okay, so that's going to be y equals 2 times x minus 4, but instead it's going to be -2 minus 4. And then x plus 1 will instead be -2 plus 1. On bottom, we have x plus 4, so -2 plus 4. And then x minus 1, which is -2 minus 1. Okay, so let's clean that up a little bit here. So that's going to be y equals 2 times -6 times -1 on top. And on bottom, it's going to be 2 and -3. Okay, so we multiply that through. Negatives cancel. 6 times 2 is 12. Okay, so 12. And then on bottom, we get a -6. That will give us a -2. So when we plug in a -2 for x, we got out a -2 for y. And which one of these was it, C or D, that we needed to have a negative answer? It was C. Okay, so this one, when we plugged in a -2, we got negative, which is good. This one, we plugged in a 2, and it would have been positive, so it can't be D. So this is f of x right here. Okay, f of x is C. Okay, let's look at the other one. This will be the last one that we do. Okay, so let's factor the top, factoring a 2 out. So 2 times x plus 1. I'm just dividing out a 2 out of both these terms. I'm going to factor this. Okay, so 2 numbers that multiply to get -3, but add to get 2. That's going to be x minus 1 and x plus 3. Okay, so our vertical asymptotes, write that up here. Okay, x minus 1 equals 0 will give us x equals 1. We'll move the 1 over, change the sign. X plus 3 equals 0. Move the 3 over, it becomes x equals -3. Okay, so our vertical asymptotes are -3 and 1. Okay, so that's our VA. Our horizontal asymptote, oh, you can't see. Our horizontal asymptote is here. Okay, so bigger on bottom, so that's y equals 0. So my HA is y equals 0. So I have a horizontal asymptote that's 0, that's on the x-axis, and here are my vertical asymptotes. Let's see what that gives us. So does A work? Well, the horizontal asymptote works, it's 0. And do we get vertical asymptotes of -3 and 1? Yes, we do. So A is a possibility. Okay, let's see, B. Here's our vertical asymptotes of -3 and 1, and our horizontal asymptotes right on the x-axis, which is good. So B is a possibility. We've already used C. Let's see on this one. On D, the horizontal asymptote's in the wrong place. It's up here at 2, so that's no good. Here on E, the horizontal asymptote again is in the wrong place. It's down here. It should be right on the x-axis. And finally on F, the horizontal asymptote's in the right place, -3 and 1, so F is also a possibility. Okay, so what can we do to narrow it down out of A, B, and F? Okay, so let's see if there's a number we can plug in that will give us 3 separate answers so we can use it to figure out which one it is. So I'm looking at 0, which is right here. If I plug in a 0 into A, it'll give me a positive answer. It looks like about +1. If I plug in a 0 in for B, right here, it would give me a +2, it looks like. Okay, so that's a little bigger positive number. And if I plug in a 0 into F, it would give me a negative answer. So I should be able to plug in an x equals 0 and see which one it is, A, B, or F. So plug in x equals 0 into the factored function. So that's y equals 2 times 0 plus 1 over 0 minus 1, 0 plus 3. Okay, multiply that through. 2 times 1 is 2. And then that's going to give us a negative 1 and a 3 on bottom. So that's 2 over negative 3, which is negative 2/3. Okay, there was only one of those three was going to give us a negative answer. That was this one, F. We plugged in a 0 and we got an answer that looks about negative 2/3. If we did A, it would have given us positive 2 about, and B, or B, and A would have given us about positive 2/3. So that leaves the only one that we plugged in a 0 and got a negative answer out of those three was F. So G of X is F. And that's it.